To pull this off, I knew I was gonna have to dig deep. So I swallowed my fear, sucked in the biggest breath I could.
We all know these movies that try so hard to be something they're not that they start losing any identity they may have had in the process. We've seen that with Mac and Me trying to be E.T., Ants in a Bug's Life trying to be each other, and The Good Dinosaur trying to be an actual Pixar film. But if from any company I didn't expect to see a ripoff of this caliber of, it's freaking Disney of all things. They may have been accused of borrowing some material in the past, like was the case with The Lion King and that Japanese cartoon and, well, themselves, but nothing quite comes to the level of 2006 The Wild.
Rabbit.
While only produced by the company and quite a few others, it very proudly boasts their logo right up on the front of the cover, leading me to assume as a kid that this was an actual Disney film, while in reality it was animated by some company called Core, who helped bring us such classics as Valiant, Planet Sheen and Angela Anaconda. This CG animated film from the mid-2000s features a varied cast of animals, with the main one being a lion from the New York Zoo. One of them wants to escape to the wild, where all of them end up in the end and, well, hijinks ensue. The similarities to Dreamworks' Madagascar are genuinely uncanny, and while the film takes a relatively different direction with it, if you've seen Madagascar, it's gonna get difficult trying to shake off the feeling that this film was more than a little inspired by it. And it's funny because Madagascar would later go on to become one of Dreamworks' most important franchises, next to the likes of Shrek and Kung Fu Panda, while The Wild was sorta just left in the dumps, barely even making back the money spent on it. Even kids seem to have not liked this film as much as the Dreamworks original. Sorry, I was one of them. But due to that, some critics actually tried to defend this film as the superior, more mature version of Madagascar, stating that for the adult who may very well have to experience this film and who may have experienced Madagascar, The Wild is better. The animation is better, the jokes intended for your children are better, the jokes intended for you and not your children are much better, the songs are better, and it's more fun. Now, you know what, maybe our boy Tim is right. Maybe this is the superior film. Whoever said that copying something immediately makes it a lesser product? After all, isn't that the sincerest form of flattery? I think I'm finally ready to take a look back at what I remember to be an absolute disaster of a movie, and who knows, I may even end up loving it. The film starts off with our main character Samson, voiced by Kiefer Sutherland, telling his son about his heroic adventures in the wild, in order for him to be able to overcome his fear and show off his mighty roar, which turns out to yet again be a meager meow. It's always a great sign if the opening sequence of the movie has better and more interesting animation than the entire rest of the film. You gotta always remember to clickbait your viewers into wanting to continue watching the movie you already paid for to go to the cinema to. It's not like the rest of it looks bad per se, but I really wish they would have gone with this more simplified look than the realistic one they made the rest of the film in. It would have also helped make characters like their friend Benny the Squirrel be a bit more cartoony and fun. He's voiced by Jim Belushi of all people and still gets the most boring, cliche and unfunny lines in the film. And while he is introduced as this buddy type deal to Samson, really only serves as a comic relief, much like any other character here, but we'll get to that later. At closing hours, when everyone has already left the zoo, it pulls a Toy Story on us and shows what all the animals are up to when no one else is around. This is also where we meet the rest of this fun and colorful cast, including the koala bear Nigel, who is fed up with being called cuddly and cute all the time, Giraffe Bridget, who is fed up with being wooed by Benny all the time, and the snake Larry, who's also there. The real focus of this film, however, if the Lion King parallels weren't clear already, is on Samson's son Ryan, who's tired of being too weak to prove his worth to his dad. So when two of his friends come late at night to cause trouble, he sees this as the perfect opportunity to blow off some steam while his dad is out curling.
Look at that broom work!
While trying to play around with a few gazelles, they cause a stampede that shakes the entire zoo and leaves Samson more angry with his son than ever, and him running off into a nearby truck. But because Ryan seems to not have realized that trucks eventually would also move, he is met by the surprise of being taken away into the wild. I wonder who Samson will ask for help about this.
What offerings must I make, I wonder?
Are you serious with this? You take away my Apu, and yet you let this disgrace for any Indian culture and animation slide? Are you kidding me? It might seem like I'm just brushing through this movie right now, which, yes, I partially am, but you also have to understand that the pacing on here is really awful. Characters get introduced almost every second of the way, and it barely leaves you with any breathing room to take in what just happened. Some might argue this was done for comedic effect or for them to be able to sell as many toys as possible, which are valid points, but really not our relationship with these characters, since most of the B-rolls seem more like afterthoughts, if anything. It's better to mention this now, since even if I were to do a half-hour full-on analysis of this thing, I couldn't possibly mention every single character in here, and it also wouldn't serve much of a purpose, so for the time being, just imagine the rest of the cast being kinda like these pigeons, and you get a feeling for the kind of quality you can expect. Despite Sam insisting none of them have to follow him to save his son, the animals all head off to do exactly that. On their way there, they come across the Times Square, a well-known excuse to use as many product placements in your film as possible, and also clocks by Coldplay. Kinda weird to hear a song from them back when they made actual music. Their short adventures in downtown Manhattan lead them down a sewer, where they meet two alligators named Carmine and Stan. The two of them show them the way to where Ryan is being shipped off to a nearby island, and much like the penguins from Madagascar, charter it to try and find him. After days at sea, they arrive on the island, where after an unfortunate first encounter with the Hyrax, also called dassies, which are small, thick-set herbivorous mammals in the order Hyracoidea, the gang starts to grow suspicious of Sam's hunting instincts, which as it turns out is justified, because he admits to not even having grown up in the wild. This really sets off Ryan, who they finally found a few minutes afterward, since he basically built his whole life on the lie that his dad is this great, impressive lion who has accomplished everything he's trying to be. So these two don't really have the best time right now, but it's nothing compared to Nigel, who just found out that he is actually the god of the local wildebeest gang, because they started worshipping that stupid doll he used to hate so much. Being a god would normally be a pretty neat deal, but unfortunately they're also setting out to eat his friend Sam in order to be at the top of the food chain, so that kinda sucks. But he is still better off than Benny, who is being rolled on by German dung beetles, probably suffering severe concussions in the process, only to then assume his best friend to be dead at sight. Yeah, it's one of those days. The others are already being brought to the wildebeest to be eaten, but after Benny gives the first actually genuine pep talk to his supposed best friend, the two of them find the strength to save their friends. With the help of some chameleons, that is.
No!
Huh. He turned into every good joke in this film. After a very short bit of convincing, Nigel decides to use his powers to set his friends free, which in return exposes him as the phony he is, and a battle between them and the wildebeests to ensue. Sam is being cornered by their leader Kazar, while Ryan uses up all his strength to help his friend defeat that maniac. Psych! He's still too weak. Nothing is relevant. This whole film was useless. It actually has to be Sam who defeats the villain, which genuinely makes me question who exactly this film was about and if there was any lesson to be found in this. Since the volcano erupts and everyone besides Kazar makes it out alive anyway, I guess it doesn't matter all that much though, and all that awaits us now is the obligatory final dance scene. So, the wild, huh? Yeah, no, my opinions on this film haven't really changed over the years. Back when I first saw it, I assumed it to be another funny animal film in the realm of Madagascar, Ice Age, and Over the Hedge, but was really let down when none of the jokes really stuck at all, and the plot was such a jumbled mess that it was hard to even sympathize with any of the characters. The quote-unquote realistic animation was no help here either, since most of their simple yet overly detailed designs were clashing so much against the straight-up photorealistic backgrounds that it had some genuinely uncanny valley feel to it. And like I said, when it's trying to be funny, it usually fails miserably, with too many one-off characters at once and most of their dialogues relying on the cheap stereotype they are based on. Even the main characters themselves lack any chemistry or fun personality traits that would make me want to continue watching, mostly because so many others got introduced all the time that they barely even got any chance to get fleshed out. In Madagascar, the direction was very clear. You had these zoo animals, with one of them wanting to escape to the wild, while the other only cared about getting back to the zoo and being the king again. But along the way, their separate interests changed and they learned to become friends again because of that. The only characters we met were either comic reliefs, served the plot in some actually significant way, or only reappeared because they were running gags. It's something different when you only introduce a character once for a stupid gag and never bring it up. It's like Family Guy, or a filler episode in a series show done wrong because you shouldn't need a relief for a film that's only a little over an hour long. I know kids' attention spans aren't that great and all, but you gotta have at least some faith with things like this. If you don't, we just end up with another Minions film. Don't get me wrong here, it's not like there isn't anything positive to say about this film. The voice acting for the most part is pretty good, and there are some decent song choices sprinkled in here, even if they weren't original ones. It's not like Shrek 2 quality, which came out a few years before it, but really, what is? The animation and acting department certainly did a much better job than the writers and editors had, and I think much of this is due to how quickly this came out after Madagascar. It's almost like they saw the success that film had and wanted to cash in on it as soon as possible. But I can't say with 100% certainty that this was how it happened, because supposedly screenplay ideas were being thrown around way before Madagascar came out, and production had also started a few months before it, but it would at least explain why the writing on this was so awful, because they simply didn't have the time for any rewrites. Madagascar 2 would come out just a few years later, and while I personally didn't like that one nearly as much as the first, it is undeniable that it paved the way for the success of the studio for years to come, with spin-off series, rights, merchandise, and sequels galore. Going off of the way that franchise was marketed and is being remembered now, I really can't say the same about The Wild. And even if you take Madagascar out of the picture, I doubt there'd be many people trying to defend it for the quality of it alone, or that Disney would ever admit to producing what is essentially an embodiment of that copying someone's homework meme, because after all, they didn't have to release this film. If they were this content with the final product and didn't feel the need to have any rewrites, to not have it feel as similar to that film, then we should judge it based on that too. And oh, I didn't even mention Orion running away and Sam chasing after him only for a friend to help him get back on his feet is also just Finding Nemo. So if there's anything we can learn from this film, I guess it's to not rely too much on what came before you and find your own path, or whatever. Again, if any of you have fond memories of this film, I'm not here to judge you. I can see some redeeming qualities to it, and if you didn't grow up with some of the other movies I've mentioned, then this formula would certainly feel fresh. And some of the characters may even make you chuckle every once in a while. But for those of you who have never seen The Wild or are setting out to find some hidden animated gems in the mid-2000s library, I think there are some way better options, which I might have to address in another video, but that is a story for another day. My name is Cosmodore, and if you'll excuse me, I have some smashing to do.